you guys, panelists, for being here today. And I'm going to introduce you guys in just a minute, but just a quick opening here. Today we're talking about recovery on AFAR Live, what that actually looks like, and what and who will travel first. And we thought this week was the right week to really dive into this topic because we're seeing more glimmers of hope than ever before. There seems to be a huge effort on mapping out a safe way for people to travel again when we can. So it seems that there's like a lot of preparation happening right now. So when borders do open, we can hit go and people can go if they want. I mean, the number one question we get before AFAR Live is when will borders open? So I'm just gonna open and say that I don't know and none of us here know, but there are signs that they will reopen and maybe sooner than we think. So for example, in Europe, France, Austria, Germany, and Switzerland will allow free movement between the citizens of those countries as of June 15th. There's no international rules yet, but I think this shows that they will come. And we're hearing buzzwords like travel corridors and bubbles, green zones, immunity passports, all of these things. Some other interesting things that I've seen lately: private jet trips are up 40% in May over April. So we've talked on AFAR Live a lot about luxury travel coming back first. It's another good sign there. Disneyland Shanghai reopened, and tickets, they were at 30% capacity, but they sold out in minutes. So with social distancing, temperature checks, and face masks required. But you kind of have to wonder how much of that will work in other countries. And then today, you guys probably saw this, many of you, Iceland will allow tourism as of June 15th and will pay for all visitors who want one to get a coronavirus test so they don't have to do a 14-day quarantine. The same thing in Austria, although the traveler has to pay 190 euros to do the test. So in Iceland, it's not free indefinitely, they've said. So, all of these things that are happening, there's a lot of things happening, but a lot of it's still confusing, right? Like temperature checks. I have a toddler who spikes a fever when she's teething. How would that work, right? If she has a fever at a hotel, and what is considered a fever? Could you show your test results from the airport and skip the temperature check? So there's a lot that's still kind of overwhelming and confusing and questions swirling around right now. And then there's organizations, of course, like the World Travel and Tourism Council that are, coming up with global standards, saying that with a coordinated approach, the recovery timeframe is significantly reduced. So we'll see. We're going to talk about things with our panelists today, and we like to say the next normal, not the new normal, which I like better. So that's where we'll start today. We have Josh Bush, the CEO of Avenue 2 Travel, based in Philadelphia on the main line. Thank you for being here. We have Joy Jibrilu, the Director General of the Bahamas Ministry of Tourism and Aviation, based in the Bahamas.
Thank you very much for having me.
We have Gloria, Loree, the Senior VP of Marketing and CMO of Destination Canada, who's based in Vancouver. Hi, Gloria. We have Stephen Taylor, the CMO of Accor, who's based in Paris.
Bonjour.
Bonjour. We have Helen Hill, the CEO of Explore Charleston. And then from AFAR, we have Greg Sullivan, our co-founder and CEO, who's currently in California. And then we have Ellen Asmodeo, our Executive VP and Chief Revenue Officer, who's based in New York City. So I'd love to kind of start with Greg, because without you and Joe, there would be no AFAR. So I wanted to ask you to talk a little bit about AFAR, how things have been, and how you're looking at this and how we can help the industry recover and get people traveling again. And also, if you can let us know when borders will open, that would be great.
Well, thanks, Annie. And yeah, it's really great to be part of this wonderful panel. For AFAR, like all of us in travel, it's been really tough road. You probably heard a few people speak the last couple months about the Mandarin word for crisis being, on the one character meaning danger and the other side being opportunity. And that's certainly the way we've looked at it. And, the danger, of course, very real to our health and our economic survival. So, we've had to take some tough steps with furloughs, pay cuts, et cetera. We did that very quickly in mid-March, but our team has, responded so amazingly. So I hope many of you read our emails and our social posts and all that. We like to say we speak to the world's best travelers, and, travel and shelter at home. There isn't a bigger antithesis. And so it's a very tough time for our audience. And so We've approached it with empathy. We approached the news with how it affects them. Tried to put humor in it, and of course, try to be inspirational. And we've definitely got our audience's attention during this time when they're mostly stuck at home, and I think we've really built up more trust with that audience, which has been, which is an amazing responsibility also. Business-wise, we've tried to do some things to position ourselves to be stronger. One of the things I'm most excited about there is we built a partnership with Vox Media, a really strong partnership that enables us, we already speak to the world's best travelers, but this gives us so much reach. We now reach 85% of the US digital audience, and we can target them by interest, we can target them by demographics, but most importantly for this subject is we can target them geographically, because so much of reopening is going to be about attracting people from nearby originally, at the start. So I think that's going to be a real advantage to us as we think about, as we're building programs and attracting, speaking to the audience in this time. So reopening, that's, at AFAR, we've always taken we've always viewed when there's a catastrophe, a real responsibility to try to support that destination in recovery, whether it's hurricanes in the Caribbean, Arab Spring in Egypt, or wildfires in California, whatever. It's always about, how do we support those destinations in recovery? We started AFAR in our in the Great Recession, 2008, 2009. Not the best time to start a business, but we definitely view it as a business. We have to make money, but we did this because we really believe in the power of travel to enrich lives and make the world better. And so that's the way we view everything. It's like, how can we help our audience? How can we help individuals, and how can we help the world? And so, we really view this as, the biggest challenge of our lives is recovering to COVID-19. When is it over is such an interesting question. There was a great article in the New York Times on Sunday, Gina Colada, I don't know if you saw it. It was talking about the end of pandemics over time, going back to the bubonic plague. And it says the ends are never very clear. They're always kind of fuzzy. First of all, you got two ends. You've got the medical end, when the incidence of the disease and deaths decrease dramatically, but you've also got the social end. When does the epidemic of fear wane? And they move on with their lives. And those are they're two very related things, but they're not always totally coincidental. So anyway, we see that unfolding right now as we're all, going through this balance of public health and public health being, trying to avoid incidents of the disease and death, but you've also got economic, non-medical health, our economic and personal happiness that are, also on the other side, these competing interests. And you see all these communities are now dealing with that. And they're all, I think there's 48 of the American states are in midst of reopening processes. There's so much, desire. We have to, we're not going to be able to shelter in place till we have a vaccine. That is clear. It's 18 months. That's just not sustainable. So we're going to have to all behave responsibly. As hosts have to be responsible hosts, and guests have to be responsible guests. And that's what so from AFAR, that's our role. I think we speak to both. We speak to destinations, we speak to travelers, we speak to travel advisors, and we hope to try to help people, because these are so new things for all of us, try to help them balance the interests and make good decisions and do the best that we can. So that's an amazing responsibility, and we're, that's what we get out of the bed trying to do every day, and looking to make this reopening the most successful and that we can for everybody, and also with an eye towards the other side of the reopening, that we build a travel industry in a world that's even better than the one we had before.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Greg, so much. And I mean, I think the hardest thing about it for so many people is there isn't one day it's gone and then the next day it's back, right? It is that phased recovery that's so difficult and challenging. So Stephen, I wanted to kind of move to you for kind of a global view, because you have more than 5,000 hotels around the world. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
A few of my favorite brands: Raffles, Banyan Tree, Fairmont, Sofitel, One Fine Stay, I love, M Gallery, 25 Hours, a ton of brands. And when we talked before, you have your hotels in Asia reopening, and you shared some interesting stats. Can you talk a little bit about that? And then also what you're seeing as far as who is traveling?
Yeah, of course. And thank you, Annie, for the shout out for all of our premium and luxury brands. I appreciate it. I mean, listen, I think we're certainly looking at China when trying to understand what shape the rebound is going to take. And I think certainly looking at China, there is scope for optimism. I think in April, China occupancy was 35%. And that's not normally room for optimism, but generally, given where we were even a couple of months ago, that's very positive. We have 100% of our hotels now open. If you look at Labor Day, there was 115 million Chinese traveling over the 4-day period in early May. And again, that's 40% down on last year, but it's showing that domestic business is coming back if we can get this virus to a degree under control domestically. And I think looking at China in more detail allows us to understand which segments and what travel behaviors are going to return first. So I think everybody recognizes domestic travel will return earliest, but really it's almost hyperlocal, it's regional, it's state specific. Over Labor Day in China, the average length of distance people traveled was 136 kilometers. So very, very close. So, people will be much more willing to drive than they will to fly in the very near future. I think certainly another trend was people are very fearful of crowds. So they're looking for seclusion. They're looking to get back from nature. They're looking to get out of confinement. They're looking to get into the countryside. So I think that will certainly talk to some of the other panelists as an amazing opportunity. There's also certainly a shift in the demographic of people traveling after the crisis. So you're seeing a much younger single audience traveling in China at the moment than before. So an example is there was 57% of the people traveling in China over Labor Day were under 30.
Wow.
So it just shows you kind of how much that demographic post-crisis will shift. And I think interestingly, probably the last point for people on the call, economy and mid-scale hotels certainly have a higher occupancy. So people are price conscious. But we did see over Labor Day, with leisure and family travel returning, half of the hotels booked were premium and luxury. So people are willing to pay for quality. They're willing to pay for seclusion, for reassurance, for peace of mind. So that's something that the luxury and premium brands can really play towards.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I love hearing all of the stats and analytics, because it just shows that people are traveling again and they want to. And Josh, I wanted to move to you because, thinking of the hyper-local, and of course, we've talked about how your clients are going to probably be traveling hyper-local at first, but I mean, how much does that fear factor kind of play into your client base? Where do they want to go?
Yeah, I think, Annie, fear is the key word today. It's fear to make sure that one, me and my family, we're safe. And number two, am I doing my role and responsibility in protecting my community and not spreading to others? And so that's one of the things where I think, people are going to be concerned. And what we found from our own research is that has divided our client base into kind of others and who might be more predisposed to it. Second are the kind of the on the fencers, and then the third are what I like to call our intrepids. Those are the ones that are willing to get the best values that are out there and the best travel deals and to take advantage. But that being said, I totally agree on the domestic market and on the drive market. That's what we're going to see sooner rather than later. As Greg said, 48 of the states are already have plans to start to open up. We're going to see our clients hopping in cars and driving, again, 100 miles, 150 miles. The other thing that we're having a lot of inquiries on are private modes of travel. We were talking before about private jets. We're getting a lot of inquiries for private jet charters. And then one of the other things that was really interesting is we had one client, just this week talk about how do I charter not just an RV, but I want like a rock star bus. Something that they go on a rock tour with, and I'm going to take my family cross country, and be able to see the States that way. So we're going to see a lot of domestic travel. We're going to see a lot of national parks. We're going to see a lot of places that are socially distant, and boutique hotels with, smaller amounts of rooms are going to do far better than those that are really, really large.
Wow, I love that, because I'm always looking for travel trends, Josh. So that's good.
But private travel is what the majority of the inquiries that we're getting right now.
Thank you for that overview. Very interesting. Joy, you have dealt with crisis before, being in the Caribbean, of course, mostly all weather related, I assume. But why is the Bahamas in a good position post-COVID? Because it really is a domestic part of the domestic market, I think. What are you seeing and feeling?
So good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for having me as part of this panel. Ordinarily, I'd like to say hello from a warm and sunny Bahamas, but in fact, it's overcast, and we're actually preparing for what could potentially be the first tropical storm of the hurricane season. So a couple of weeks early. And I think it speaks to the fact that we always have to be in a state of readiness to deal with some crisis, as you rightly said, most often weather related.
Yeah.
But one of the things I want to say for people who may not know, tourism is the cornerstone of the Bahamian economy. In fact, it accounts for approximately 50% of our GDP. And so with an event like COVID-19 and what we're experiencing, the impact on the economy of the Bahamas is just incredible. Of course, we know that the impact on the global travel and tourism industry as well. And so this is a crisis the likes of which I think certainly my lifetime, my parents' lifetime, and for many of us, we've never, ever seen.
Yeah.
So how do we deal with it? As I said, we're used to dealing with crisis, normally weather related. We're just coming off the heels of Hurricane Dorian. And at the time, we thought that that was perhaps the most extreme event that we would have experienced in our lifetime. That's only 6-7 months ago. Category 5 hurricane that rested for over 2 days over 2 of our islands. And then straight onto that, the heels here. But there are lessons learned from having been through so many hurricanes, having to communicate to the world that we're not decimated, that the whole Bahamas is not wiped out. Mm-hmm. And key to that is messaging, communication. The audience is looking for transparency in that communication. And included in that, one of the things we talk about and always have to do is educate our audience about the geography of the Bahamas. 700 islands, we market 16 of them. And yes, while a hurricane may hit 1 or 2, others are open. So similarly with COVID-19, I liked what you said, the next normal, not the new normal. Coming out of this, we think we're well placed similarly. And hearing what the other persons who spoke just before me said, having 16 islands to choose from, the majority of which uninhabited, secluded, boutique properties, luxury, we think that we are so well poised. Yachters, we're a haven. We know, let me preface that or change that. Research is showing that yachters from the United States certainly are perhaps reluctant to go across to the Mediterranean. So we are well poised to capitalize on that. So taking advantage of our 16 island proposition, offering secluded beaches, social distancing will not be an issue, and all the other things that have been mentioned that are just key part of what we promote and market.
Thank you. I think messaging and trust, right? Those are key buzzwords. Absolutely. Helen, you're in Charleston, and you guys have reopened or are reopening much of the city. Is that right?
That's correct.
And what have you learned so far? Charleston has a very trustworthy reputation. In the past couple weeks, what kind of learnings are you taking away from reopening, and what visitors are looking for?
Well, first of all, let me tell you, thank you so much to AFAR. And Greg, thank you. Y'all have been such a great inspiration to everyone who could not travel during this whole time. And it's really been a pleasure to enjoy those things. And we're at about 70% reopened. And we have never been more proud of our industry than we are right now, because they have really taken the cornerstone of health and safety and put that first. And particularly when you're dealing with many small luxury properties and non-branded hotels, they were really willing to not only take the guidance from the U.S. Travel Association and then the guidelines from the state of South Carolina and put those things in place to make people feel comfortable when they travel. So we're off to a good start. Yesterday, Wild Dunes Resort on the Isle of Palms opened, and as you predicted at AFAR, the close-in travelers came first. We laughed and said that they came from other parts of South Carolina to enjoy some time on the beach. So it's sunshine and 70 right now. So I think they made a good decision.
I love that. And I wrote this in an email to you, but it's a 12-layer coconut cake, right?
It is. I'm sorry I didn't have that for you to be enjoying right now.
I know. All the way in London. That would be quite a trip for that cake, but one day I will be back. So thank you. And that's good to hear that you're welcoming people again, even though they live close by to start, and then kind of moving out from there. Gloria, when we talked, the biggest word is trust right now, but you had some points that stuck with me. One is that there's gifts in a crisis, and that you think people will be kind of less about the bucket list and more about a value exchange. How are you talking to your partners in Canada and thinking about opening it up when you can?
Hi, everybody, and thank you for having me. It's really interesting, the value exchange, and something that nobody has really touched on just yet is the idea of community. And we talk a lot about the travelers and then industry stakeholders, but there's that third sort of really important piece to that triangle for what we're seeing is the communities, and how the communities are really starting to appreciate the value of tourism as it relates not just to the economic benefits, but the social and cultural benefits that really make up the DNA of a community. And so if you think about, and this is why I really have appreciated AFAR, not just in terms of your messaging through this period, but from the outset, which is this real aspiration and understanding of how there's a reciprocity when travelers come into a community, and they're not just dropping some money and taking pictures and leaving, but really truly understanding that idea of transformational travel where there's knowledge exchange. And perhaps when people leave, beyond the set of Instagram shots they might have, it's really is the new perspective that they gain by being exposed to a particular community. I point to, when I think about the sort of very progressive culture that I experienced a number of years ago in Portland, that made me think about my own city in Vancouver, where I live, a little bit differently, and start to appreciate my own local makers and artisans even more. And I think when we look at what is happening, and if this reemergence continues, because we don't believe the progress will be linear, and there may be dialing up and down. What you see when you get hyper-local and into your own backyards is you really start to appreciate what you have. And I don't want to be like Dorothy, Wizard of Oz, kind of, it was always here. But you know what? Every corner of our states, every corner of our provinces and countries has gems and amazing people who make it so.
I love that. And I think it's also our responsibility whenever we do go to a place to carry it with us, right? And kind of feel responsible for those people and those businesses in a way, because we had a chance to experience that and those connections with people. Thank you, Gloria, for that. To kind of move, a little bit in a different direction, questions about safety. And again, we've talked about how there's different kinds of people and everyone's threshold is different. But Stephen, in particular, the hotels, how do we ensure that hotels will kind of stay cool and not so weird with all of these new regulations? That's been a question I've been getting a lot.
Yeah, no, I think there is a huge emphasis now on making sure that we reassure customers and that they feel that hotels are safe. And we're putting in, a very significant amount of new cleanliness and prevention measures to make sure that guests do feel reassured when they do start to travel. The challenge is, of course, you don't want a hotel to necessarily look like a hospital, and you don't want customers to feel like they're going to have to turn up and dress like an astronaut,
yeah.
or a medical patient to actually stay in a hotel. So. No, I think, it's always about trying, and I spoke to my team about this today. We're pulling plans together of how do we actually ensure that the attitude of the brand, the values of the brand aesthetic comes through and doesn't get smothered by an array of sanitary equipment. So that can take many different forms. It could be branded masks, right, that we use and design to bring to life the Sofitel French DNA. Plexiglass feels like it's going to be universal, but then how do you make sure that that's not just functional, but actually integrated into the design in an artistic manner of the hotel? How do you look at amenities and don't just do what you've always done, but maybe look at immunity boosters and things that actually talk to the needs of your customers at that moment. So we're looking across the customer journey. I think the industry is naturally responding extremely strongly to the concerns of customers. And it's the job of the brand teams that we have and the branded organizations to make sure that when we do that, it's brought to life in a really sophisticated, premium, surprising manner that makes our guests feel special.
Yeah, I love that, and definitely don't want to be in an astronaut suit or a hazmat suit on a beach or in a restaurant. So, no. Thank you. The rest of you too, Joy, Gloria, and Helen. Are you guys working with anyone? Are you aligning with anyone as you come up with standards, or are you just kind of shifting your messaging? Are you looking at surveys, data, government advice, all of it?
Yeah, absolutely. For us, we started with the U.S. Travel Association and them doing some more broad guidelines that gave categories. And then through the state of South Carolina, we did it on down to the city of Charleston. And I think that's been really helpful for us. And two things we found is, one, that perhaps the average visitor doesn't already understand what our hotel and restaurant partners already do on a daily basis, because we had some funny conversations about, are you cleaning a hotel with what you may clean your home with? They might not have known that we already had rigorous things in place, but also doing things in visual clues in terms of doing some of those things that used to be more back of house, maybe doing those the right way in front of the guest to ensure that confidence. Sort of yesterday, Catherine and I had a beautiful lunch at Hall's restaurant in Charleston, and they had on the edge of their table this organic hand sanitizing spray with lavender, and the server put it on when they came to our table and when she left our table, almost like a doctor walking in and out of the office. But it was very refined, and it made you think fine dining, and it was correct with their brand. And I thought, wow, they do that all the time, but I saw it and I felt it.
I love that. And we've been having a lot of conversations too about, like you said, a lot of the places that we travel already have these standards, right? So how much further can you go? It's more about kind of telling that story, maybe doing it in a different, fun way. I love that. And I love lavender. Joy, what about you?
It's amazing. If you looked at where we were 2 months ago and where we are now, we've already started to adapt. we're already taking so many of the changes that have come about as normal for us in the Bahamas as around the world. We wear face masks. Everybody is washing their hands in a way that they did not do so, or to the extent that they did so perhaps a few months ago. And certainly in the Bahamas, what we're looking at is when we look at travel through airports, where were we pre 9/11 and where are we now? And we take it for granted. And so, yes, we're working collaboratively. We have, in fact, a tourism readiness and recovery committee that encompasses every touch point of the tourism sector, working on looking at global best practices, looking at what's being done from IATA, airports, ports, cruises, you name it, to come up with standards that will be universal. Also looking at that in a regional capacity for the Caribbean. And so hopefully what we come up with when we reopen, the big question that we're all dealing with, is that it will be uniform to what's happening across the world, and so will be the norm as opposed to the weird and wonderful.
Yeah. I like that. And Gloria, are you guys aligning with anyone, or how are you looking at the kind of the health and safety protocols?
Yeah, so our job at Destination Canada really revolves around marketing, communications, and research. So we defer to our partners, whether it's Transport Canada, to ensure that our industry members know what their guidelines are saying and how they need to work together. We work with the Hotel Association of Canada, and I really loved, Helen, that you acknowledged how much hotels already do and that people may perhaps not have known the kinds of measures that are the properties across the country already take in hand. I think one thing that's new for us that we weren't paying as much attention to before, and this speaks to my earlier comment, is we're actually monitoring community sentiment. Because if people aren't going to feel welcome into a community, just because the health of that community is still very fragile, then we want to make sure that that's appreciated and understood. Canadians are known for being friendly and nice, and we want to make sure that people understand that nice might mean that the elders in Haida Gwaii, for instance, need to really protect that fragile community where the health services wouldn't support an epidemic, and that they need to protect that forest and that special place even longer. So we're monitoring community sentiment by community from community, and we're actually cutting it down to and trying to understand it as in, are people happy to welcome folks from their own neighborhood, their own province, other provinces? And what we're watching and seeing and observing is this growth in a welcoming of people from a little bit farther away. But as you get farther and farther into international, people still aren't comfortable yet. So that's kind of, I think, an interesting, a really important piece for us to be paying attention to.
Very interesting. And you guys are nice, but you're not pushovers. So that's a key differentiator. Shift gears a little bit. Greg, you've been traveling.
Anyway, can we hold on just a quick second? Can we go back real quick? You know, I think there's a huge opportunity here for us to communicate and to educate. It's all about those guests and clients that are on the fence, and we need to make sure that there is an opportunity for a competitive advantage for hotels, cruise lines, suppliers to be able to tout what they're doing on beyond what they already have been doing. I've seen so many hotels start to partner with hospitals and third-party companies in order to kind of win over customers with a good housekeeping seal of approval. But I'll tell you, there's one company that's out there that I'm really impressed with. It's a digital healthcare company called ShareCare, and they've aligned themselves with the Forbes Travel Guide. And what's really unique about them is that here's a medical company that is now getting into the hospitality space and providing them a turnkey, comprehensive, medically based solution. So they'll come in and do a complete assessment of your hotel. They'll train all of your housekeeping. They'll put that implementation in place. They'll certify the hotel. They'll continue to go back to that hotel and make sure that everything is up to snuff. And they've got these ongoing guidelines. And the other great thing is that they're providing a lot of the answers and the information, not only just for guests, but for travel advisors as well. It's probably the most extensive program that I've seen out there that really combines medicine, science, and hospitality kind of an all one direct solution. And, you know, for my team that is getting these questions all day long, and we're trying to convince that 30% on the fence, that's really what's helping us kind of give that peace of mind to clients. And again, that's what our hoteliers need right now, is to be able to have that first to market and to be able to do that communication, do that education. And those are going to be the ones that are going to be able to capture that extra 30% that we're not getting.
I mean, Josh, to follow up with that too, go ahead.
So I just wanted to say to Josh, I think that's such a great idea, but I think we have to look at this holistically, the whole travel journey. And as hoteliers, obviously the focus will be in hotels, but we need to know, and it would be great if there is, or there are companies that are dealing with it, because your traveler wants to know that they are safe from they get into your airport, get on a taxi, take an excursion. And that's something, I guess, some of us who are in destination management that we're having to look at.
And and Joy, that's what's so exciting about this, is that now we're seeing this kind of this blend of medical and technology and hospitality all come together that we didn't necessarily have before, to try to create some of those standards and put those things in place and to help people answer those fears. I mean, I've just recently come across this company, ShareCare, and you know, there's so many other third-party companies that are now looking at how do we diversify in this time of crisis. As Greg was talking about opportunity and crisis, we're getting these melds that we hadn't had before. So by all means, this definitely applies to DMCs, to cruise ships, to airlines, to all of tourism.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think there is a huge focus in the hospitality industry and the travel industry in general in partnering now with a variety of, let's say, hygiene certification organizations to try and essentially prove that you're going above and beyond and reassure consumers that are on the fence. An example again from China is an OTA there, Meituan, indicated that a hotel that had a label, a cleanliness label, some kind of certification from that OTA was 1.6 times more likely to get booked than those that did not. So it really talks to the number of consumers that have a concern for their safety and want to be reassured. I do think there's a great role for travel advisors in this future as well, because you know, we used to talk about greenwashing, where every organization was talking about, you know, the environmental impact and the good they did for the community. Now we're going in for a different type of washing, but related to cleanliness. So I think travel advisors can really help peer through the forest of pledges that are now going on and actually check which ones are really taking a scientific and thorough approach that benefit the guests.
Yeah. I think Helen hit the nail on the head earlier when she said, you know, what was once hidden should now be front and center as far as our cleaning goes. That's the new luxury, is to whenever you wipe down the door as soon as you walk into property, or clean off the front desk at check-in. We want to see those staff members front and center, following up behind us, and that's going to give people, again, that peace of mind.
And Josh, to ask you too, kind of on the flip side, we had a question in the chat here, and I want to start with you because of your clients, knowing your clients. Views of kind of the medical testing, like the temperature checks that I talked about at the beginning. Do you think people will accept that? And for how long?
I mean, I think the most recent point in history is post 9/11. I think that we were very understanding. We were very, appreciative of having TSA and longer lines and doing what we needed to do in order to be safe and to make sure that when we got on planes that we were safe. I think that will be a trend that we'll see probably today through the end of this year, as things start to subside and it's, our patience starts to wear a little bit thin. But right now it's too soon to tell. It's still novel. It's still new. I think that people have an understanding. So, and they're going to want those extra measures and hurdles to get through to make sure that they're being safe, that they will wear masks on planes. They will, load the plane from the back to the front and give up status or automatic upgrades. Some of the things that we're so used to traveling, that we're going to be in line for a little bit longer. But I think that patience will probably last a good 6 to 9 months. And if we get to a point where, we have seen the virus subside, antibody testing come into play. And now you almost see your own clear, fast pass area for people with, immunity passports, as you were talking about before. That's some of the things that I think are in the future. But for the most part, I would imagine the public is going to be just appreciative to get out of their house and travel again.
Yeah, I mean, everything you're saying is that people will do whatever it takes, right?
Yep.
They want to get out, and they'll do what they can for at least, like you said, 6 to 9 months. Helen, do you agree with that kind of with the hotels there? Is that?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I just went and got for y'all. You can see with our, we're very fortunate to have the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston. And so they were our first partner. And so you're going to start seeing these white glove certified stickers, again, helping people know that the hotel is going above and beyond all standards to ensure your safety.
I love that. The stamp of approval.
Yeah, Annie, I think medical coverage is going to become, or medical support is going to become important, certainly for international markets as well. And that's something we're hearing for our customers. Something we're working on actively is how do we actually reassure customers, not necessarily they're going to be not just safe and that the hotel is clean, but if the worst happens and they do fall ill, then we as a hotel group, as a global hotel group, can actually bring some partnerships to bear that actually ensures that they will get medical support wherever, whenever they are. So that's something we're looking at very closely as well.
Well, and
wellness travel takes on a whole new concept these days.
Yeah.
It's not just about yoga and going to the gym, but it's how is my whole health picture taken into play?
Well, actually, it brings up an interesting question, because we talk, and this is also in the chat for you, Josh, about clients booking city versus places and hotels that are kind of in rural areas, but maybe you're not as close to a good hospital at that point. I mean, is that something that you think will be a factor for people that they're?
Well, I think our trend, what we're seeing is primarily domestic, and that most of our clients are going to have a good sense of feeling that if they're within the United States, they're very close to good medical care. And so that they would be, leaving some of the risk versus reward of being isolated and in a not so dense population area outweighs that need to access, emergency medical facilities. And again, given the nature of this particular virus, it's usually not something that is so rapid onset that you need to be at a hospital within minutes. That sort of thing. So again, I think that we're seeing people taking that social distancing aspect, and for the very nature that we have been in the same 4 walls for the last 2 or 3 months, we want to be outside. We want to enjoy nature. We want sunshine. We want fresh air. We want birds chirping. And I think that that's really where that impetus is going. But for me, quite frankly, I'd love to be in a restaurant with other people and be back in that city life. But that's just
Me too. I know. And that's where it comes in, right? Everyone's different, right? And if you're, if you've lost someone.
The overwhelming trend more, I think, is to be in a less dense population area.
Yeah. Gloria, I wanted to ask you first, because I wanted to shift a little bit. We've touched on a little bit, travel as a force for good, which was our theme for AFAR Live a couple weeks ago. But when we talked, you had some interesting things to say about DMOs and kind of reimagining how they can be more focused on travel as a force for good, economically, culturally, environmentally. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I don't know if everyone understands how different marketing organizations work, but a lot of them for cities, especially in the US and Canada, they rely on hotel tax and or at the state and provincial level, they could rely on a combination of hotel taxes and rental car tax pass-throughs. And so it's a pretty singular focus, and when you look at where the source of revenue comes to, then their membership. But as all those DMOs have lost basically their revenue and their budgets, they're really thinking about their role in more understanding and looking at the resilience of marketing organizations and development organizations that are ground more in development agencies, so economic development agencies. And I don't know if I'm just going to give you an example to illustrate what I mean. When it's all about a hotel tax and you can't then have staff or promote, you can't talk about all of the, you just don't have the resources to do your job, essentially. So if you think about a different model for that funding piece, but also appreciating and understanding what tourism brings to community. And so little old PE Island, Canada's smallest province in terms of geography, has a very famous fictional character, Anne of Green Gables. And they have a musical in their theater there. They have a lot of experiences that relates to just this idea of the gentle island. Well, their festivals and events are being canceled as a result of the lack of ability for people to cross provincial borders, never mind international borders. And so if you think about it, it's more about looking, and I love the language that New Zealand uses in the way that they're viewing the circular economy within their own country. And that can pass through to any country, state, or even small community, which is, are we building something just for people from away? Or are we really appreciating how the place is really reflective of the people? And we have a wonderful board member from Fogo Island. She's founder of Fogo Island Inn, and she talks about community as being the human response to geography. And so if you think about that and that human response to where people live and how they are in their community, and so thinking about these places that we have with their specificity and the response to where they live is really an interesting new way, I think, this next way of appreciating the value exchange when you're in for travel. And perhaps we should be thinking of new models in the way that we set up the marketing organizations and make sure that we are helping people understand social, cultural, economic, and environmental benefits to travel.
Absolutely, but I don't believe you that Anne of Green Gables is fictional.
You know what? We have there are some visitors who actually have been reported to cry when they get to Prince Edward Island and find out that Anne is not alive.
She's there.
So,
I know she is.
Yeah, she's the Japanese, and as an example, love Anne of Green Gables, and they are a surprisingly huge market for Prince Edward Island.
Thank you for that. And I'm going to move into some questions. So if you guys whoever feels like they want to answer, please jump in first because we have so many of them. But someone said too, funny how it seems only COVID-19 is the only medical issue. There have always been medical concerns while traveling. Are hotels and destinations thinking of providing emergency medical contact information to travelers as they arrive, connecting travelers with medical assistance in the destination, maybe like a card or something?
Yes. So
Joy.
sorry, was that for Helen?
I'll start with Joy and then I'll go to you, Stephen.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
So just to answer very simply, quickly,
Definitely.
yes, it's something that we are definitely considering, having signage with all the key information, and that's going to be a part of it.
Yeah. Is that a definitely too, Stephen, or?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I think I mentioned it before. Medical coverage is something that certainly when you're traveling out with the US, and medical support and out with your home country is coming across very loud from our customers that they want support for. So we're looking to put that in place for all consumers, or all guests rather, in the coming year ahead.
I did want to ask, because this was asked a couple of times too, about how, because so many, like I said, people have already been sanitizing and clean for a long time. Something we have to consider is sanitizing with less impact on the environment and health. How many types of chemicals are, might be potentially harmful for guests and employees. Is that something else you guys are thinking about right now? Anyone who wants to answer.
So if I could address it, even if it's something that's being discussed, we've not seen anyone dealing with it to say these are products that are going to be good for the environment. So I'll use the Bahamas, the Caribbean, any beach destination as an example. We all now know that suntan lotion, the impact that has on the oceans, And so we don't want to see this now becoming another problem. So certainly we're discussing it. I don't have an answer or solution, so delighted to hear from the rest of the panel to see how the hoteliers are dealing with it, and maybe they have best examples as well.
Again, at the moment, we're very focused. Again, we're still very early in this crisis, so I wouldn't say necessarily we're focused on the impact that the new measures has on the environment. I think candidly the initial focus is just making sure that our consumers were safe. Certainly, as I think you mentioned, the measures that we're putting in place are building on policies and programs and protocols we've had in place for years.
Yeah.
So it's not like we are introducing new harmful chemicals to our guests or to the environment. Really, I think as Helen mentioned, a lot of this stuff is perhaps just making it more visible, increasing the frequency of what we're doing, but it's really not necessarily unloading a bunch of new chemicals onto the environment or to our guests.
All about messaging. I know I kind of cringe because you read sometimes it's like, and then they'll get sprayed down again, or and just kind of message words like that. We don't want to hear that. But there could be an opportunity for someone to come out and be like, we are sanitizing and it's with 7th generation or whatever brand you want to use.
And I think this is something that's so topical and so important to so many of today's travelers, that they want to ensure that you're not doing anything to harm the environment. And to Steve's point though, but to add to it, the frequency with which we're now going to be cleaning. So while there were established cleaning protocols, I think the increase in frequency is much greater. And so this is something that will have to be considered for those of us who are in very small island developing states where environment is such a huge concern.
Yes. Helen, were you trying to jump in, or? Yeah.
I was going to say, one of the fun things about being in the South of the United States is, the whole Southern hospitality thing. And, you always get your door opened for you. And one of our bellmen at one of our wonderful hotels is now he is wiping down the door for you, right, as you walk in addition to opening your car door. And so just those things, again, back of house things coming to front of house to be the visual clues, things we've always done, but now are going to do more frequently and more visually.
I love that. Just shifting it and changing the messaging. How important will contact tracing and testing be to getting people on the road again? Josh, do you think?
I mean, I don't know how much of a role we can play in that. I mean, I think that's pretty much we're going to see that more at a government level. In working with others. Obviously, there are countries that are not as free as the United States and are going to be able to have a little bit more access to some of that data, and perhaps we can utilize some of the models that they do to see how that works here. And then, from an anonymous standpoint, you've already started to see some of the tracing models of cell phone usage on large scales and contact groups. But I think that you will see, if you want to travel foreign to other countries, there are going to be registrations. There is going to be tracking. There is going to be giving up of and registrations of giving up of certain freedoms that we might be used to here for that very thing. And so I think that's going to be something that where we're talking about having the patience of being in line and being scanned, and there's going to be some of those hoops to jump through. And as a result of those bureaucratic necessities, that's going to create delays and in some cases inconveniences of being turned away. And that's an expectation we need to start to set with some of our clients for the short term, unfortunately.
Absolutely. But I still think people will take a lot of that on to be able to travel. So I wanted to quickly kind of do a roundtable, and I love to kind of get inspired about travel and dreaming about travel because we want to be traveling. So I want to ask each of you kind of a hidden gem or a favorite spot in your destination that you would recommend to everyone on the call. I will start with Joy.
Very, very easy. The Bahamas, 700 islands. As I said, 16 we promote. The Exumas. There are 365 keys that make up the Exuma chain of islands, one for every day of the year. Astronaut Scott Kelly said, the most beautiful place on earth. I invite you to come and experience it yourself. I cannot wait. It will be my first trip, just supporting domestic tourism and ensuring that our local economy keeps going. But I also look forward to inviting everyone else as well.
Someone just said they're rebooking some clients for Exuma in October right now. So
thank you.
Josh, what about you?
Well, there's nothing more socially distant than being on a game drive at Landalozi in South Africa and chasing some leopards. And if somebody sneezes, you can always push them out of the vehicle and let the lions deal with them.
Perfect. Greg, what about you? I mean, it's hard to pick one in New York or San Francisco or Arizona. What about like a hidden place that you love or favorite destination?
Oh, well, if you're just saying in California where I am now, I love going up to Humboldt and just experiencing the redwoods in the upper part of the state and getting away. And I'm very anxious to do that.
Yes, as soon as possible. Helen, what about you?
Well, you can imagine I have a lot, but just with Wild Dunes reopening, I just see myself sitting at the Grand Pavilion on the edge of the ocean with a cocktail. I know, Ellen, that shocks you. With a cocktail as the sun goes down, and I'm going to do it as soon as I can.
I'm sure Ellen would join you with that, or has.
Yeah.
Gloria, what about you?
I'm sure Greg is thinking I'm going to say the beach at Tofino because he knows I love it there. It's my place.
And I do too.
But I'm going to give a nod to Stephen, and because I was also reading that, one thing that Canadians and Americans, but even more Canadians, are missing so much are patios. And so when I think about a couple of iconic patios, oh my gosh, think about being at the Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel or in Quebec City on the patio looking out over La Belle Provence. Those are pretty spectacular properties to be in where you can just really
I think I'm packing right now.
yeah they're so beautiful, you can just picture them. So anyway,
I'll join you there,
iconic.
Gloria. Socially distant, of course.
Yeah, with a mask.
And Stephen,
I'll
what
take you
about
up on it. It's a deal.
In Paris or wherever, I guess.
I'll say Paris. I mean, the Hotel Molitor in Paris is stunning. It's next to Roland Garros. It's a converted public bath, so it has an outdoor swimming pool, a rooftop terrace. So you look out over the clay courts and the Parisian sunshine, and it's beautiful. And it's also a hotel that's been doing a lot of good for the community by creating thousands and thousands of lunches for the healthcare workers of Paris. So
Amazing.
the Hotel Molitor in Paris.
We need to go thank them personally.
Yes.
Yeah, no, you're all welcome.
In person, thanks. Ellen, what about you in New York? And then I'll let you close. And someone just said they have to move on to their next webinar. So thank you guys again for joining us. And Ellen, I'll leave it with you.
So I have had this Central Park in front of me. So I'm going to talk about my hidden gem today, not when I'm able to leave, but I go into the park on occasion, and I have found Bethesda Fountain with that beautiful angel sculpture that watches over New York City to be a solace for me right now. And I bring a nice cooler with ice and champagne and some cups, and then a few friends can come in with masks and socially distance. And that's been my hidden gem since I walked out of the apartment and went into the park. So Central Park has been such a solace for me right now. So I will continue to go into it as I can freely float in the coming months, even though I'm going to be on a plane because I booked my first air ticket this week. Because I can't help doing that. But anyway, this has been so amazing. You are an incredible panel, and I'm grateful for all of you. And Annie, once again, very, very honored to have you as part of the AFAR family. Greg, you talked about, the opportunity that's coming out of this. And many of us spoke about the power of travel and travel as a force for good. And we know that will be one of the residual effects, is that we take better care of our places. And Gloria, you mentioned that a lot, as did Joy and Helen and each of you. But trust is something that's resounding, that we hear a lot. We had our advisory board meeting a week and a half ago, which Josh sits on, and trust to the audience that we have, and Greg mentioned that, trust in your destinations to make your guests feel secure and confident, as well as the communities. Trust in how we interact with each other, and the fact that, you know, Accor will make sure that they're trusted when someone comes. I think this is going to be the biggest factor, is how do you gain trust? And certainly the advisor community will help. AFAR is doing their part, as you all are. So I am hopeful and confident that we will emerge in a better place, and I appreciate all of you today. Next week, Thursday, we're going to focus on something that we've talked about a lot at AFAR, and now is even more important: destination stewardship. And that again goes right back to how travel is a force for good, and how we take care of not only our travelers, but our communities and the earth itself. So I look forward to seeing you all next week, and thank you again to everyone.
Thank
Be
you.
well.
Appreciate it. See you in person sometime. Yeah.